All right, today we are building a contemporary fireplace mantel. The client wanted a smooth, aerodynamic, cloud-like looking mantel, so this is what we came up with. The whole thing is about 8 inches tall, so I got some 12-quarter lumber to build up the thickness, and this stuff was quite the workout to mill and machine because it is basically a 3-inch thick beam that's 6 feet long. Then once I got each board with a clean jointed edge, I took it over to the table saw to rip it to width. The table saw is my chosen method for handling big beams like this. I realized the bandsaw might be a little bit safer because we're still not totally flat on the bottom side, so this could move around a little bit and potentially pinch the blade. But this beam is so heavy that I don't think there's a lot of risk of kickback on something this big. And the thought of trying to wrestle something this big across the little tiny table in the bandsaw just sounds like I'm just asking to throw out my back. So I stick with the table saw on this, jointing one edge to get me reasonably flat or something that I can track against the fence. Now that I'm to my final width, I need to clean up the top and bottom of each beam so that I can have a nice clean glue surface. So from here on out for the next little bit is just going to be an exercise routine of hefting them across the joiner to get a flat bottom and sending them through the planer to get a flat top. So I spent some time trying to match the grain between the layers, and this is kind of like the opposite of when you're doing a tabletop and you're matching the grain between the boards going across the face of the board. Here, since we're building up and the front of the mantle is going to be the visible portion, I'm trying to match the grain on the edge of the boards. The fireplace mantle is at its full depth in the center and then tapers closer to the wall as it gets to the ends. And that taper happens in both directions, from the center of the mantle left to right, and then from the top of the mantle down to the bottom of the mantle, it also tapers towards the wall. So to help guide me in creating these tapers, going from the center out and then from the top down, I'm creating a series of templates that also taper to that shape that I will strategically place as I go. The fireplace mantle is a bit wider than my laser cutter, so I did a little dovetail joint and glued the templates together to get them to the full width. All right, so I got a collar on the router, and we're just going to trace this template. And of course, normally I would relieve as much material as I can on the bandsaw, but again, I don't want to heft this big, huge beam across the bandsaw and wreck my back. So I'm just going to take my time with the router and trace it out. Because the router bit wasn't long enough to go all the way through, I flipped it over and repositioned my template and just cut it from both sides. All right, and then I just repeated this process for each layer of the mantle, and each layer progressively got more narrow as we went towards the bottom of the mantle. It's now time to start gluing everything together, and I threw a row of floating tenons across the back to help keep everything aligned as I assembled it. All right, and then to make sure I didn't have any gaps in that front edge, I put a bazillion-and-one clamps on there. All right, and there was a little variation across the back, so I sent it across the joiner to clean it up. All right, just to make sure things didn't go off the rails while I was gluing things up, I made sure that the first layer was dry before I glued on the second layer. All right, and then from this point of view, you can see how the layers taper down from the top to the bottom, and then to get that smooth cloud shape, once this is all glued up, I'm going to power carve it. All right, so before I glue on the bottom layer, I'm going to get my cloud shape started. So I have a roundover bit in the router table, and I'm just going to put a nice gentle roundover on this, and then that will give me something to start to blend from when I start my carving. All right, we're going to glue that guy on there just like we did the others. All right, and then I rounded over the top as well. I clamped a block on there to help give me a good solid starting point so I wouldn't have to start on the end grain, which could be potentially dangerous or cause a huge blowout. All right, I took it in several passes to get down to full depth, and then once my final pass occurred, I removed that clamp so that way I could route the whole thing in one nice smooth swoop. So now that we got the blank glued up together, I have a series of templates to help plot out the shape of the mantle. So the first one is the end cap, so we're going to get that shape established. All right, now it's time to start carving the shape, and I just got started by knocking off the high spots and sharp corners. All right, I just kept working my way down. All right, so to help guide me, I made some templates. Those templates just slip over the top of this guy. And since this tapers down, each template gets smaller as it goes along. So this one's for down here somewhere along the lines. We're not quite there yet for that guy to fit over there, but this will help kind of guide me with the shape. So what I'm doing is, this one's 37 inches from the end, so I find 37 inches from the end here and slide it over here so I can kind of eye down that this curve here is very similar to this curve. So next I need to grind out this until this fits further down. And then once I get it really, really close, then I can start to kind of scooch this along back and forth a little bit until I get to the next smaller one on this side, or at least halfway in the middle, to help gauge how smooth and consistent I'm staying with my template. So that's the deal. Time-consuming process, but it's the process I came up with since I don't have a CNC that can do this large of a piece. All right, and as things progressed, I adapted my strategy to really carve out one section to where my templates fit nicely. And then once I got each template fitting nicely to where it belonged, I was able to connect the dots. So basically I had the center template fitting pretty nice, then I had the template towards the middle end fitting nice, and then I carved the two together to kind of meet them in the middle. All right, we're just about down to final shape, just using my finger as a spacer and sliding it along that space there. It's a pretty even space, and that curve matches pretty closely to the curve of the template. So I'm pretty happy with that, and I just got a little bit more to go there on the bottom and top to get that radius to fit all the way down around the template. And since I am so close, I basically took some blocks of poplar and created a negative of the shape of the mantle into 2 blocks, and then I glued some like 60 grit sandpaper, something really aggressive, into that block, and then I'm just using that to dial in the final shape. And then that pencil line that I created earlier from the first template is still there, so I'm just working my way down to it. And then as I go, I will blend the ends into the front. All right, we're getting down to the final shape, but it's kind of hard to tell sometimes where all the dips are, the low spots, the high spots, the imperfections. So basically I'm coating the whole front with some chalk, and then as I sand, it'll sand away that chalk, and that chalk will sand off the high spots, or the chalk on the high spots will disappear. And then once all the chalk is completely gone, I'll know that I am really, really close to having a uniform finish, or a uniform surface. All right, and I'm using the softest sanding pad that Festool makes, so that way it kind of forms around the mantle, around that organic shape. All right, as you can see, there are still some chalk marks in areas, and those are just places where I got a little heavy-handed with the power carver and left little divots and gouges. So I'm just going to keep sanding across this surface until I slowly work all those away in a nice uniform finish. All right, aside from final sanding, from when I'm ready to put a finish on it, the shaping is done. And so now I am just centering up a drilling jig to drill holes for the hardware to slide into. And the hardware is already mounted on the job site, so hopefully this jig will help guarantee that the holes will line up with the hardware. And basically we're just drilling down with a big auger bit that matches the inside diameter of those pipes. Right, and the bit wasn't long enough, so once I got the hole started and going nice and straight and square with the jig, I came back and drilled them to final depth. Right, and this thing weighs a ton, so it's going to be a lot of work to heft it up against the wall and get all the pegs lined up to all the holes. So to help the pegs find the holes, I am rounding over the exterior of the hole so the peg can just be kind of guided in. All right, and then to make it easier to install and also lose some weight for shipping, because I got to ship it 3 states away, I basically have a little jig here that I'm using to route out some slots just to relieve some material to lighten the load. All right, and then the reason for the jig is to add some uniformity to the situation. I want it to look good when it shows up on the job site for the client to install. And then also I want it to be uniformly balanced. So I don't want one side of the mantle to be heavier than the other side. And also if one side has more mass, it might be more apt to twist or warp on that side than the other side. So a little uniformity just to make it look like a professional job, and then also more stable. All right, and I lost a video clip somewhere along the line where I routed in a metal C channel all the way across the length of that thing and in the center of it to help it make sure it doesn't warp or twist on me. And then after I did all that, I sent it across the joiner a couple of times to make sure the back was nice and flat, so when it gets installed it'll fit nice and tight and flat to the marble, and with any luck it will have minimal wood movement because we've locked everything in with that C-channel and removed some mass, so it'll just sit there nice and clean looking for the client. Next step is to get it sprayed with a finish and shipped off to the client. All right, and there we go. The client sent me a couple of photos of it installed in the room. Thanks for watching.